Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Angela Love-Zaranka, Program Director for Lactation Education Resources.
And I am Sekeita Lewis-Johnson, Accredited Provider Program Director for Lactation Education Resources. Thank you for joining us wherever you are in this world.
So today we're going to go through the steps that you need to do in order to become a board certified lactation consultant, but just a few ground rules to get us started. How to ask questions. So asking questions on the GoToWebinar platform is pretty easy. If you're on a desktop, you'll find the question bar right here is indicated by the blue arrow. And if you're on a mobile device, take a look at the green arrow and it points to the question mark at the bottom of the interface. So if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to ask. We really would like to hear from you and also where you are participating today. And if you want to tell us a little something about yourself, feel free to do so. So I have been an IBCLC for over 25 years. I started out working in the community and community support, peer support, over 30 years ago. And I've worked in a hospital, I've worked in a private practice, I've served on international boards of directors for our profession, as well as the program director for Lactation Education Resources. How about you, Sekeita? What's your background?
My background is by way of nursing. I've been a nurse for 25 years, and this is my 15th year as an IBCLC. I will be recertifying this year. Glad it's only CERPS, but I also have worked as a CLC, or I was a CLC long time ago before I became an IBCLC. I've done community work. I've also worked in a hospital setting and private practice. And so, yeah, I've done a host of things, and I'm just glad to be here to share whatever knowledge that I can impart on the realities of becoming an IBCLC.
Thank you so much. So, becoming an IBCLC, if you decide you would like to be one, and if it's something which fuels your passion, you will join more than 34,000 IBCLCs in 120 countries all around the world, countries, territories, and states. Now, credentialing as a lactation consultant is offered by the International Board of Lactation Consultant Examiners. Take a look at their website, IBLCE.org. They have different regional offices depending where in the world you work or live. Review the requirements and the pathways to become eligible to take the IBLCE certification exam. What you need to know? The detailed content outline or the exam blueprint is based on a survey of IBCLCs in various practice settings around the globe. The outline covers all of the topic areas and the chronological stages an IBCLC needs to know in their work. LER's courses cover the entire detailed content outline, and our courses are approved by LARC, which is the Lactation Education Accreditation and Approval Review Committee. That's the organization that evaluates and approves lactation consultants training courses. Now, Sekeita is going to review a few questions. Some of these questions that you want to ask yourself today before you decide to embark on this journey. Sekeita?
Thanks, Angela. So before we take a deep dive into all the things we're going to share with you this afternoon, I want you to keep at the forefront of your mind these few questions or couple questions is, do I have these skills? And when I think about skills and when I talk about skills, I'm not just talking about the act of doing task. I'm talking about communication skills. I'm talking about clinical judgment, critical thinking, all of those things, but I'll talk about those a little bit later. And if you don't have the skills, start to think about, where can I get these skills? Where am I going to get all the skills that are discussed to make me a competent IBCLC? So let's buckle in. There's going to be lots to talk about. You can even write these questions down to think about them later. Should you want to be reflective on all the things that we discuss with you. But I think it's a great idea to really ask yourself these things as we're speaking. So what makes an IBCLC? Just a few seconds ago, I mentioned competent, to be a competent IBCLC. competency is really having the skills necessary. You have the ability, the knowledge, to do the things, to do them successfully, to do whatever it is to do successfully. So, in a nutshell, when I talk about competency, I don't mean that you're an expert in, I'm talking about just being competent, that you know what you know, and the things that you don't know, or the experiences that you don't get, you know where to go find and reference it. But that you don't utilize your own experience as your sort of gauge for competency, that you really have the knowledge, the skills, as well as the ability and attitude to do it successfully. So at the end of your training, you should be confident that really and truly, to be competent means that you are going to provide care that is not harmful. And so that is the essence of being competent, is to do no harm. Culturally appropriate and credible care. I like to unpack this by talking about what culturally appropriate means. So if you've worked in healthcare or been around anyone that's worked in healthcare or even in business sectors, you might have heard the term culturally competent. And when I think about competent, I think about mastery. I think about mastery of skills. And something that always resonates in my mind is that the notion of being culturally competent, like, can you ever be really competent, and can you master someone else's culture? And so for me, that word just doesn't sit right, so I choose the word culturally appropriate, which means that you are taking into consideration your own cultural background, your own cultural humility, which is a lifelong process of self-reflection and self critique, whereby we're not learning about just someone else's culture, we're also learning about our own. And so it starts with this examination of ourselves, and therefore we can be effective when we are trying to deliver care that is defined by humility. So what I'm really saying is that cultural humility is not saying things like, for instance, I've heard this before, it's not in their culture to do X, Y, and Z. That's not really an appropriate thing to say, really, because when we think about cultures, we know that there are subcultures. And so when you make a statement like that, that's like feeding into the stereotypes. So not making assumptions about what a person might or might not do based on their culture, because most times we really don't know unless we've been told that by that particular individual or person. So when you loop it together, credibility to me goes exactly with cultural culturally appropriate care. So my question to you would be, the first question would be, when you're asked to do something, or if you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to, how do you respond? And I talked about this just a little bit ago about being competent. Do you try to go off of a whim, or what you believe to be true, or your lived experience? So if you're saying, yes, I do that, I'm going to challenge you to do something just a little bit different. And I ask this question, and I pose this question because almost every single time someone says, I would like to breastfeed or feed my baby, my milk, people will start to tell you all of their stories about their own experience, right? And sometimes the story is, oh, it didn't hurt me, or, oh, it hurt really, really bad. I mean, but we can always reflect on our experience. But as a clinician, you really want to rely on the evidence. So being a credible resource means you're giving out information that A, coincides with the best evidence, and B, you really know what you're talking about. The next question then becomes, do you know what the best evidence is? And if you don't, where do you go find it? The interesting thing is that there's lots of information you're going to come across. There's so much to know. But keep in mind, we're not walking computers. We're not walking dictionaries, if folks still use them. It's impossible to know everything. Demonstrating credibility is about being forthcoming. It's about saying, I'm not really sure about that, so let me get back to you. And then check your resources and get back to that person in a timely manner. The reason being is because if you lose credibility as a lactation consultant or supporter, it could translate to other IBCLCs losing credibility, and therefore that impacts the profession. Policy advisor, creator, and advocate. So a couple of other things that we do as IBCLCs is we advise on policy. We advise a lot on policy. We actually help to create policies. So that's important to know from a standpoint of talking about clinical care. Remember when I asked earlier, do you have the skills necessary? Some of you in the audience may already be strong in policy. Maybe policy is your strong suit. Maybe you have a degree or some type of extra education regarding policy. And I'm like, yes, come on, we need you. We need you. There's so much more work to be done. Because, as I said, we have to really speak language that we're not causing harm to our clients, to birthing people, to lactating people. So poorly written policies can end up with unintended negative consequences. So if you are a policy person and that's your thing, you already have that piece of it. But also being a lactation consultant is being a stakeholder. Maybe policy is not your work. However, you are a stakeholder, so you should be aware and you should be at the table whenever lactation specific or lactation related policies are being discussed. So trust me, you really want to be at that table, because being at the table really informs our advocacy. And advocacy is the biggest part of what we do and who we are, along with competency. An advocate is simply a person who publicly supports or recommends a particular cause or policy. So even if you're not a policy advisor, you can be that person at the table listening to how policies are created and sharing your own personal perspective. Problem solver and researcher. Problem solving is about 90% of what we do. So all of these things are important is what I'm trying to say. I know I say that every single topic is what we do, but that's why we're bringing you what's real, because yeah, we do about 90% of all things almost all the time. Being a problem solver really means that each family is going to come to you with their own sets of concerns and own sets of problems. And really, you want to refrain from using this one size fits all framework, because we know that one size can never fit all. Really looking at families from individualizing families and making sure that we are really hearing and exhibiting compassion to what their concerns are, their barriers, their fears that they're sharing with you. Along with being a problem solver, remember I said sometimes we got to go back and we have to say, I don't really know this. And you have to look it up. Well, that's being a researcher. So, there's a few ways to be a researcher. You can be a person who carries out academic or scientific research, or you can be that person that says, hey, I have some valid tools, some reliable tools that inform my practice. I need to seek them and I need to look into them before I go further. High-level lactation care goes with skilled lactation care. When we're talking about high-level lactation care, there is a gamut. And if you're not familiar with the acuity levels, the lactation acuity levels, that considers both the maternal and parent risk factors for, or potential risk factors for premature weaning, and the infant's risk factors for premature weaning. I want you to really look at that and the framing of it and what it's telling us. So when I talk about high level lactation care, if I can not be tongue tied, I'm going to give you some examples of basic breastfeeding care, which is, in my mind, is assisting with a healthy person without any risk factors, a healthy baby without any risk factors, and they just need a little bit of support, a little bit more of encouragement, a little bit more resource sharing and cheerleading, those sorts of things. And then that's the low end. So you got this spectrum. When I talk about high level, I'm talking about a case that maybe someone's in the ICU and maybe they have a breathing tube in or they're intubated and they were lactating prior to coming into the hospital. And now you've been called to deliver care to this person. So, are you able to deliver the care? And if not, are you able to really say, okay, think through what is it that I need to really do in this case? Are you able to look at the medications and determine, hey, this medication, because this is the ICU, this medication I need to look up. I need to see what's going on. Are you able to say, wow, this person is intubated? Do they have a brain injury? And how does the brain injury impact lactation? Are you, in essence, able to make the connections of a high level lactation case? And so when you're doing your training and you're like, oh my God, this is a lot to know. Why do I need to know about the brain? Well, you need to know about the brain because that is the level of care that sets the IBCLC apart. And that's what, when we say skilled lactation care, that is the skill of connecting all the dots and making the best clinical decision and management at the time. So being able to handle complex clinical cases with sound clinical decision making and recommendations that are appropriate for higher acuity levels of care. So I'm going to tell you right now, I just gave you a really, really, really like difficult case. That's not the average case you're going to see every day. No, it's not. So you probably won't even when you're ready to sit for the exam, probably won't have ever seen that, or maybe you will. But what I'm saying is that we just have to really be able to develop our skills and continue to develop our skills and continue to really bridge the gaps and think about each person, each risk factor, each situation as one, and then proceed in the most prudent and competent actions. So trust me, you will develop and you will become an expert the more you can continue to get your education, continue to lean in on improving your clinical skills and critical management skills and critical thinking skills. You'll get there. So one of the things that we found out during the pandemic is that essential became a really, really big buzzword. And we also found out that, yes, lactation consultants are essential because babies were still being born and are still being born. Babies still need to eat. And really, during a pandemic or any emergency or any situation where, food source is threatened, we should be promoting and protecting the ability to provide human milk. That's what lactation consultants do. So we focus on bonding and we focus on the family and we focus on all of those things. However, at the end of the day, human milk is health prevention, and that sometimes get lost. So we are essential, and it's important that we show up when folks need us, and it's important that we're timely. Sometimes, there's clinics, and I love that we have outpatient clinics popping up, but what if the wait time is 2 weeks? That can make or break us breastfeeding or human milk feeding journey. So we want to avoid that. In a pandemic, it was scary when we first started. We've gotten a little handle on it. We can still do home visits in a safe way. But it's not prudent to close your doors and be like, we're in a pandemic now, so no, you're on your own. because that means that a lot of families and a lot of babies may inadvertently experience some health disparities because of that. So to make it really clear, yes, we understand telehealth is a big, huge thing, but there are many times that telehealth, particularly in rural areas, may not be the best fit for the client, or it may not be the end all to be all because we can miss some things. Telehealth prohibits sometimes our ability to use other senses. And so there are some cases where I'm like, yes, telehealth is good when we're thinking about relactation consults, antepartum consults, those sorts of things. However, there are some times when telehealth just doesn't cut it. So I just want to leave you with that, because when we think about timely and we think about essential, it's really prudent that we show up, we do our duty so that we minimize harms that are caused to families, that we are accessible, because that's what becoming an IBCLC is about, and being able to provide accessible care at the time it's needed. All right, collaborative, care partner, and trusted. So I love this phrase. I love this phrase not just today, but always in my practice, because it assumes that I am collaborating with my client. It assumes that I am not the center, I am not the decision maker. They and their families are the decision makers. So, remember, whenever you have an encounter with a family or a person, that it's their goals, their fears, and their barriers that really takes precedence over your goals for them. So I am probably saying exactly what you might have assumed I'm saying, that yes, we know exclusive breastfeeding is recommended for at least the first 6 months. We know that. But it's also important that we honor that and we still talk to them about what their goals are. And we also have to understand that we are in collaboration, in partnership, in agreement, that when someone seeks our care, that we make sure we approach it in that manner, that we don't overstep our boundaries that are not meant for us to overstep. So that's how you become trusted. In all honesty, you're trusted to really go into a situation and trusted that I see, and you're exhibiting signs to say, I see you as a person. I see you and we're in this together. I'm not higher than you, but we're just collaborating to do what's best for you. That's how you gain trust. I've seen clinicians go into clinical relationships and assume a hierarchy, like, yep, I'm the expert. I know all about this. I've been teaching breastfeeding and chest feeding for 15, 20 years. I'm going to tell you how this should work. You will lose a person right then and there. They will shut down because it assumes that there's no compassion. There's no building of rapport. Or I've seen people go in and just touch someone without asking permission. They said, oh, I need some help with latch. And the person just went in and said, okay, here you go. Touching without permission. Those are things that will lose trust. And when you lose trust, again, that equates to the rest of the profession for the loss of trust in IBCLCs. So the Institute of Medicine, when we think about patient-centered care also became another buzzword, and it still is a buzzword, but it is a model of practice that we can practice. And it just simply means the patient is the center of all of it. I've talked about culture, I've talked about care, I've talked about collaboration, and then there's communication. So the Institute of Medicine defines it as the providing care that is respectful of and responsive to individual patient preferences, needs, and values, and ensuring that the patient values guide all clinical decisions. So don't let this become a buzzword for you. Really practice what this model looks like, and then that would further build trust with you, not just with your client, but with your community. Also, even with the other clinicians that work around you. Wow. So I started with 3 questions. I'm going to end with 3 questions, and Angela is going to start speaking about the pathway. Now, while she's speaking about the pathway, I want you to keep in mind the following things. What does the market look like? What pathway am I going to take? Which pathway is most appropriate for me? What are the requirements? And how does this fit in my lifestyle? What are my current commitments with job, family, school? And also, what does lactation support look like in your area? Are people mostly in private practice? Is the area saturated? And I'm going to tell you the answer to that is no. We need you. But these are some of the things, and you might even have some of your own questions that you can reflect on. But these are things to keep in mind and to really self-reflect and analyze at the end of this session. So, Angela, take it away.
Thanks so much, Sekeita. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the roadmap to becoming an IBCLC. And it can seem like a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try to simplify it as best I can. So first, you're going to need to choose a pathway. We'll come back to this in just a minute. Now, each pathway has 3 components. The first one is lactation-specific education, as well as college courses that you may need. The second one is clinical hours, and the third one is getting ready for the exam. So the first one is the health sciences education. It's a typical education for healthcare providers. There are 8 post-secondary or university level courses and 6 general education subjects. You can find a full list of the 14 subjects on the IBLCE website, or you can search for it in the link in the resource document that we've attached to this presentation. So if you're listening live and you go to the GoToWebinar interface, you'll see a section which says handouts. Go ahead and download that PDF, and it's full of all sorts of wonderful resources so that you can refer back to them. Now, the 8 university level courses, and you don't need to write this down, they are biology, anatomy, physiology, infant and child growth and development, introduction to clinical research, nutrition, psychology or counseling skills or communication skills, and finally, sociology or cultural sensitivity or cultural anthropology. They can be online or in person as long as the institution is accredited to provide the learning. If you took any of these courses during your college career, they count, even if it was 20 years ago. Now, LER partners with Union Institute and University and Walden University to provide the basic courses. Both organizations are online. The advantage of working with Union is their program director is an IBCLC and has chosen the college courses which meet the IBLCE requirements. If you want to get your bachelor's degree in maternal child health with a concentration in human lactation, take a look at Union. Another advantage is that both universities will accept federal financial aid. The 6 general education subjects are medical documentation, medical terminology, occupational safety and security for health professionals, professional ethics for lactation consultants, universal safety precautions and infection control, and basic life support. Now, 5 of the 6 general ed courses can be taken through LER. The only one you're going to need to search for is basic life support. In many countries, there's an in-person skills check for this training. Now, I have heard of some organizations providing the training completely online, so you want to check with your local resources. In the resources, there is a link to this health sciences guide from the IBLCE. Now, the guide provides general descriptions for typical subjects in each area. Now, keep in mind that IBLCE is international. The names used in their documents to describe the courses may not exactly fit the description of the course at your accredited educational university. That's okay. IBCLC looks utilizes broad terms with the understanding that there is no one universal description for what a course in, let's say, clinical research will cover. Now, why are these 14 courses required? The IBCLC is a standalone credential, meaning you don't need another certification, degree, or license to practice. Once you pass the exam, you will be an allied healthcare professional. The courses will help you to be prepared for your career, as well as to help you to pass the IBCLC exam. Now, the second is lactation-specific education, and this is where LER has you covered. The education should be comprehensive and cover the IBCLC detailed content outline. IBCLC requires at least 90 hours of lactation education. 5 hours are on communication skills. Our 5-hour course is specific to lactation and breastfeeding care to help you in your practice as a lactation consultant. Now, the third component is lactation-specific clinical experience. This can include in-person consultations, telephone consultations, or online breastfeeding and lactation care that supports breastfeeding families. It also includes lactation assistance to pregnant and breastfeeding clients and lactation education to families and/or professionals. Now, these hours need to be obtained within the 5 years immediately prior to applying for the exam. So now, how many do you need? That's going to depend on your pathway. As I said, those clinical hours need to be accrued in the 5 years prior to applying for the exam. And how many hours do you need? Well, pathway 1 is for healthcare professionals and those who provide breastfeeding support through an IBCLC recognized breastfeeding support counselor organization. Now, according to IBCLC, healthcare professionals include physicians, nurses, midwives, dietitians, physical therapists or physiotherapists, speech pathologists, and others. Breastfeeding support counselors include those accredited through organizations such as LER and La Leche League International and the Australian Breastfeeding Association. As of today, there are over 40 organizations that have applied to IBCLC and have been approved as a breastfeeding support organization. Now, Pathway 2 applicants must complete a comprehensive academic program in human lactation and breastfeeding through an accredited university program. Their education has both didactic and clinical components, and they require 300 clinical hours working with breastfeeding families. Pathway 3 is a structured mentorship program between an IBCLC and the applicant. The IBCLC or IBCLCs, if there's more than one, must be in good standing with IBCLC. Those who choose this pathway must have their program approved prior to beginning to accrue hours. Now, I understand this is happening relatively quickly, this approval process, like just a few weeks. A quick note, for those of you who have breastfed, chest-fed, or provided human milk for your babies, the hours that you spent nursing, pumping, and helping your friends unfortunately doesn't count towards the clinical hours. Now, while 500 or 1,000 hours seems like a lot, there's a really good reason why. Each candidate needs to have the clinical experience so they can provide competent care as an IBCLC. If it's any consolation, the required number of hours used to be a lot more. I've known IBCLCs who needed anywhere from 2,500 to 8,000 clinical hours just to sit the exam. Now, candidates who are applying for the IBCLC exam through Pathway 1 need at least 1,000 hours. For the candidate who is also a healthcare provider, the hours can be done in a hospital, birth center, clinic, lactation clinic or practice, or as an independent practice as a licensed or registered healthcare professional in a non-healthcare setting. For breastfeeding support counselors from an IBCLC recognized organization, their hours can be earned in person or online. The location and type of support depends on the criteria provided by the recognized organization. The hours need to be counted on an hour-by-hour basis. So there's two important points about clinical hours. The first one is it's important for you to document the hours as you accrue them. Be very detailed in case IBCLC chooses to audit your application to take the exam. They may want to see documentation, such as a spreadsheet or other document where you counted your hours. The second point is that the 1,000 hours do not need to be directly supervised. Now, Pathway 3 requires 500 hours of clinical experience. It's best done in a busy practice setting where you can work with many breastfeeding, chest-feeding people and those providing human milk for their babies each day, such as a hospital or clinic setting. The hours count towards the 500 only when you're actually working with families. Observation hours do not count. And remember that clinical experience is graduated. That is, it starts with observation, then doing tasks under supervision, then completing tasks independently with the IBCLC nearby to ask questions and discuss. LER has an internship program with many sites around the United States. Reach out to support at lactationtraining.com and we can connect you with our clinical internship director, Amy Black, to determine if we have a site in your area. If not, we can give you suggestions on how you can work with your local hospital to facilitate an internship site. And one thing that Amy wanted me to mention in this webinar is that you can't start to count your hours towards the internship requirement until both you and the IBCLC are comfortable with you working independently. Most interns will spend about 75 hours in orientation before you can begin to accrue your 500 hours. Or you can take a look in your community to find a willing internship site or mentors. You may need to reach out to many people to find someone with the time, experience, and capacity to be your mentor. It's important to find a good fit. Talk to others who've been through Pathway 3 to find successful strategies on how to find those mentors. Now, while this program has an additional step or two in the beginning, is it worth it? It is. Well, why is that? Well, IBCLC reports that students who come through Pathway 3 score best on the exam. I believe it's that mentorship which is the key component. Learning from an experienced clinician is worth the extra effort in the beginning of this pathway. Now, a lot of people are asking whether or not they can accrue clinical hours via telehealth during the pandemic. The quick answer is yes. The longer answer is paraphrased from IBCLC documents from 17 April and 6 October of 2020. IBCLC will allow the use of technology if certain parameters are met. And you'll need to pay attention to the privacy rules and the Code of Professional Conduct and the clinical competencies for IBCLCs. Another point is that this observation using technology needs to be two-way synchronous audio and visual components, with the focus being on the mentor providing the mentoring and guidance to the applicant. Now, the guidance has been extended until 30 September of 23. Do keep an eye on the IBCLC website for further updates. Now, at LER, there are two ways to gather your lactation-specific education. One is the Lactation Consultant Training Program, which is the full 95 hours front to back. The other is either our core or bridge course. They are designed to meet your educational needs depending on your background and your previous lactation training. So first, we have this comprehensive course called the Lactation Consultant Training Program. LCTP is 90+ hours, which is eligible for CERPS, CME, and nursing contact hours. It's intended for those who do not have any lactation education and they know they want to become an IBCLC. We have more than 35 of the most knowledgeable, experienced instructors who are practicing lactation consultants, researchers, and authors who teach in our courses, including Sekeita and me. Our classes are economical. You can view them on a variety of devices such as your computer, tablet, or phone. They're optimized for a computer, but they can be reviewed later when you're on the go. Now, we have been educating people and in person and online since 1990. We update our course information with the latest peer-reviewed evidence on a regular schedule, but we will update sooner as the new evidence emerges. Have a question for the instructor? You can send an email to our support forum and we have IBCLCs available to answer your questions. Want to discuss a concept with your fellow students? We're discussing innovative ways for people to connect. Stay tuned for more information. Upon completion of the 95-hour course, you're eligible to take the Certified Breastfeeding Specialist exam. The exam is included in the price. Once you pass, you are a Certified Breastfeeding Specialist. This is to recognize you for the level of education that you have attained. With this certification, you can begin to collect your clinical hours towards the IBCLC exam. If you're unsure of where to start, or you already have some lactation-specific education hours, then we have our core or bridge programs to meet your needs. They have the same advantages as the LCTP course. Our initial course is called Core because it will provide you with the core lactation education you need to understand what it means to begin supporting the normal course of breastfeeding. It's 52 plus hours of online education. It covers the basics such as anatomy and physiology of lactation, infant growth and development, supporting the preterm baby, medications and breastfeeding, and much more. At the end of the course is the Certified Breastfeeding Specialist exam. Now, our bridge course is ideal for people who have that basic lactation education and they need an additional 45 hours to qualify for the IBCLC exam. Topics in our bridge course include legal and ethical concerns for lactation consultants, infant feeding and disasters, breastfeeding the infant with medical challenges, case studies, and clinical skills videos. Now, if you're not sure where to start and you're new to the profession, I think the core course might fit you best. Get your feet wet a little bit to see if becoming an IBCLC fits. Our 90-hour course, as well as the core or bridge courses, are available in Spanish. Capacitación en Lactancia is our new website, which provides the same high-quality education found on LER in Spanish. At LER, we believe that access to high-quality lactation education should not be limited to those who live in countries with high incomes. We recognize that in many parts of the world, the relative purchasing power of a local currency may make the cost of lactation education inaccessible. As part of LER's commitment to increasing access to lactation training worldwide, our pricing is adjusted according to the student's country of residence. In alignment with our continued commitment to diversity, LER is proud to announce our Rising Tide Lactation Equity Scholarship Program, designed to increase the number of Black and Latinx and Hispanic IBCLCs in the United States. We recognize one of the greatest obstacles to entry into the field is access, specifically demonstrated by financial barriers. LER will remove the barrier for Rising Tide Scholarship awardees. We alternate these scholarships each year. You can find out more information on our website, lactationtraining.com/Rising Tide. Our team is here to help you now and in the future. We have tech support open 7 days a week. Get your questions answered by experts in the field, and we can provide you with the ongoing support you need for your lactation career. Thanks so much for your time today. Now, what questions do you have for us? Sekeita? Any questions there?
No, I don't think I have ever seen this. Zero.
This is true.
Zero questions.
Zero questions. Well, someone actually did send me a message and they asked,
Okay.
I have some of the basics. I have anatomy and physiology of lactation. I have supporting families, communication skills, which course is best for me? And to that person, may I say that there is a wonderful, I would suggest, frankly, the bridge course in that situation. And the reason why is that if you have some of those basics and you've already been working and doing some lactation support and you just need those additional hours, then the thing that you want to do is take those courses which you may not see every day, such as infant feeding and disasters, lactation after loss, things like that, or when your breastfeeding goals, when parents don't meet their breastfeeding goals, and how you can sort of manage that. So we have some really wonderful courses. Also in that bridge course, Sekeita, I think we have infant growth and development, but also newborn assessment. And you and I reviewed that not long ago, and I think we both can agree that that was really a phenomenal course. So maybe the bridge course for this person who sent me that question would be helpful. Oh, I do see another question here about scholarships. So yes, we do have those, the Rising Tide scholarships for Black and Hispanic or Latinx IBCLCs, people in the United States. And so they're specifically intended to increase the number of Black and or Hispanic and or Latinx folks in the United States in order to meet their goals and become an IBCLC. And we do have our equity pricing for countries around the world. So if you're, let's say that you're in a country which is a low or middle income country, then do reach out to support@lactationtraining.com, and we can provide you with a discount based on some of the World Bank indicators, as well as a few other parameters that we took a look at in order to assist you with purchasing our content. So hopefully that will help some folks. I know that since we introduced our international equity pricing, we've seen a huge jump in folks who are able to finally afford our training. And for those folks in low and middle income countries, it really is something which is real. I know that with the pandemic has caused recessions as well as other financial strains on many folks around the world. I was chatting with a colleague in Argentina who said that inflation in their country is 100% over the past year. So indeed, we are, and we do listen to folks who are in other countries, and the purchasing power of their currency is not able to mean that they can afford it. And so indeed, we do monitor that situation relatively carefully. So good. I think that's it. I think we caught all the questions today.
Yeah, this was a quiet bunch. I'm hoping that we answered all of their questions because we did so well. Angela, maybe we just did it to perfection. So, we
That's
answered
it.
all the questions before they could answer. So,
That's great. That's awesome. Yes. So thank you all for joining us today. And indeed, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at support@lactationtraining.com. Thank you very much.
thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.